Right, everybody, welcome to part two of this discussion on the income tax enslavement. In the January 1946 issue of American Affairs, uh, Beardsley Rummel, who at that time was the chairman of the powerful New York branch of the Federal Reserve System, wrote an article entitled "Taxes for Revenue Are Obsolete." In the introduction to this article, the editor of the magazine summarized Rummel's views by saying, quote, his thesis is that given a central banking system and an inconvertible currency, money not backed by gold, a sovereign national government is finally free of money worries and needs no longer levy taxes for the purpose of providing itself with revenue. In other words, with a fiat currency, you print the money out of thin air. You don't need taxes. You just create it, right? Counterfeit. And that's exactly what it is. That's what they've been doing since 1913, right? It's illegal, unconstitutional, counterfeit money. You don't need to charge taxes to raise revenue. You just create it out of thin air, right? Rummel, incidentally, was the one who devised the system of automatic withdrawing during World War II. Thus, he's an obvious, reliable authority on the purpose and nature of the federal income tax, right? He served on the board of the Federal Reserve. So if our federal income tax is not needed to fund the federal government, then what exactly is this tax money used for? On January 15th, 1984, the Grace Commission, a private sector blue ribbon committee impaneled by Ronald Reagan to find ways to cut government spending, stated in its final report to the president that, quote, 100% of what is collected is absorbed solely by interest on the federal debt. All individual income tax revenues are gone before 1 nickel is spent on service taxpayers expect from government. Yes, you've heard correctly. Not 1 nickel or even 1 penny of personal income tax collected by the IRS goes to pay for government services, government programs. Instead, this money is used to pay the interest on our debt to the Federal Reserve. Interest on fiat fake currency. It's absolutely astonishing. Jewish bankers set it up this way. But there's another, even more sinister reason for imposing this unconstitutional tax on American citizens. In the same American Affairs article that we just quoted from, Beardsley Rummel wrote this: the most important single purpose to be served by the imposition of federal taxes is the maintenance of a dollar which has stable purchasing power through the years. Without the use of federal taxation, all other means of stabilization are unavailing. You know what he means by that, right? In other words, the true purpose of the income tax, or the main purpose, there's other purposes. They want to destroy your livelihood, right? To keep you held back. But an even bigger purpose of the income tax is to maintain relative economic stability, because as you print more and more money, you devaluate the money that's already in circulation and will easily and quickly create a condition of not only inflation but hyperinflation, crashing the whole system. But by siphoning off huge amounts of it out of people's pockets and taking it out of circulation, you can stave off almost indefinitely the collapse. Well, I mean, it's inevitable. It's going to collapse sooner or later, right? But you can hold it off for a long time. And that's all they've been doing since 1913, right? Well, more specifically, since World War II, when the individuals in this country, citizens started to get raped with this fake tax. That's what they've been doing all this time, right? It's a carefully contrived scheme to hide the fact that they're creating hyperinflation by pumping the economy with yet more and more and more and more worthless pieces of paper. We can see the devaluation as we look back, right? That's why the cost of everything goes up. That's why the cost of gold has gone up, right? It's not that gold has become more valuable. It pretty much maintains the same purchasing power that it always has. What has lost its purchasing power is the dollar against gold. So what they don't tell you is it's not that the dollar is being devalued. The dollar is, it's not that gold is gaining value. It's that the dollar has lost value. It's devaluated. Truth is, our dollars don't have any value. It's frickin' paper. But you know what I'm saying, right? You used to be able to trade in your dollars for gold. They used to say, redeemable at any Federal Reserve branch for an equal value in gold, Then they changed it to silver certificates. Ultimately now, all it says on there is, in God we trust, because they're hanging on a wing and a prayer, right? There is no redeemability. Try taking $1 into the bank, or for that matter, a $1,000 bill or whatever, What's the biggest denomination? 100,000? Take a $100,000 bill and ask for $100,000 worth of gold. They're going to laugh at you. You won't even get $1 worth of gold. They won't even give you a grain for it. It is not redeemable at all because of the hyperinflation and the massive interest on the loans the government has taken from the Federal Reserve. It's a game set up so they will always win and everyone else will always lose. Through fractional reserve banking, guys, the Federal Reserve was given permission to loan out 10 times the amount of what they have always had in reserve. It's phenomenal. So, if the government wanted to take a loan for, say, $1 million, back in the day, in the early days of the Federal Reserve, $1 million was a lot of money back then, They only had to, the bank only had to have 1/10 of that to lend out the other 90%. It's frickin' mind-blowing. And where does the other 90% come from? They created it. They simply called the Treasury, okay, print $1 million worth of bills. Absolutely astonishing. And then they flipped us the bill, right, through taxation, which only pays a fraction of the interest, not the principal. Every year that goes by, that amount keeps going up and up and up. We owe more and more and more, when in fact we don't own anything because nothing was ever really borrowed. It's just a numbers game. Worthless, valueless pieces of paper. In God we trust. Nixon completed the picture in 1973, right, when he took us off the gold standard. Some people think, oh, well, we just, to fix that problem, we just need to go back on the gold standard. Well, no, that's not going to fix it either because they control that whole market, right? In fact, we've reached a point today where all of our gold at Fort Knox has pretty much already been sent overseas into foreign accounts and Swiss banks, right, as payment on the debt. There is no gold backing the dollar at all. Nothing backs it except for one thing. You know what that is? People's blind faith in it to think it has value. And so the game continues. They keep collecting those worthless pieces of paper and use them to buy tangible assets so that when the thing crashes, or when they set it up to finally crash, right, they'll determine when that's going to be. When it crashes, they don't lose because their wealth isn't dependent on the dollar. Everyone else's is. So when the thing crashes, all that money you have in your account now has suddenly become absolutely valueless. But to ensure that you will go down when they pull the rug out, as Mr. Klaus Schwab has said, they're pushing now to arrange it so nobody will own anything. You technically don't even own anything now, right? They can take your property anytime when you can't afford the outrageous property tax, which I'll be talking about down the line soon. That many people have lost their homes that way already, right? But we've yet to see the full outplay of where this is all going. They plan by 2030 to end all private ownership of property, so that when they pull the rug, you won't have any assets because A, the dollar has been completely devaluated, so all your cash holdings are worthless, and B, you won't be able to base any financial stability on property assets you have, because you won't own them officially anymore, right? You won't have any claim to them. Everything will be socialized. The government will own everything. You will just be a tenant renting. That's technically what you are now, but it's not enough to their liking yet. They want to completely remove, so you don't even have any title, nothing, right? No ownership. So when they pull the rug, they will own everything, and you will own nothing. Are you going to be happy with that, as Klaus Schwab said? Now's the time to decide you're not happy, not then when it's too late. But this is their plan, guys. It's been their plan all along. They're going to own and control everything, including you. That's their goal. And this fraudulent income tax system and its accompanying Federal Reserve central banking enterprise is a big part of setting, the stage for all of that. And indeed, the central banks and their fiat currencies in all the other countries too. What Rummel failed to mention in the quotes I just cited from him is the fact that the income tax was never intended to prevent dollar devaluation, but just to help to control it and to delay it, right? It's just a game of continually propping things up. Prop it up some more. Prop it up some more. Whoop, it's tilting. Prop it up some more. There you go. There you go. What? It's tilting the other way. Prop it some more on that side. There you go. The thing is a fragile structure. The slightest breath will knock it over, right? But they keep propping it up, propping it up, propping it up until they're ready to take it down. They're obviously not ready yet. It hasn't quite collapsed yet. But when it happens, it's not going to affect them. When I've told people about this over the years, that's the first thing they say. Well, that's ridiculous. Why would they crash the system? That's going to screw them up too. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. You've been set up to place your faith in their phony system that they don't have faith in, right? They just use it to amass tangible assets for themselves. They don't base their wealth on the worthless fiat currency. They know better. They created it, right? No, their wealth isn't dependent on that. Never was. Anyway, the income tax also gives the Zio pig bastards more power, right? Because the less money you have, the less power you have. And thus, the more power they have because they're holding all the chips, right? It's giving them more power. Most people today cannot afford legal proceedings when they get screwed by El Governmente, right? But even if you could afford it, would it even matter? Because the system is corrupt to the frickin' core, right? They're always going to come up with a winning hand. The whole thing is set up that way. Very rare do you hear of stories of an honest judge who actually rules in favor of, individuals that are getting screwed by the system. Very, very rare. And as time goes on, that's going to get even more rare, so rare to where you won't hear of stories at all like that anymore. This situation, though, becomes all the more pathetic and seems most ironic when one considers the fact that the American Revolution was said to have been fought over unjust taxes, right? And yet, when you look back, that really wasn't the reason. That was the excuse, as always. That was a lie, too. But nevertheless, right? For the people that fell for it, Did you know that that tax only amounted to between 1 and 3% of a person's wages, depending on how much tea you drank? And if you didn't drink the tea or simply boycotted it, then it was no percentage of your wages. You didn't pay it at all, right? And yet, look at the tax burden we have today. 1/3, just from the federal government, right? You add in local and state taxes, your property taxes, you are paying well over 50% of your wages in taxes, which means that from Monday morning until sometime Wednesday afternoon, you are not working for yourself. You're working for the government. Can you believe this? They convinced the colonists to go to war over an indirect tax that people could have opted out of, and which only amounted to 1 to 3% of their wages anyway, for the maximum tea drinkers that didn't boycott the tax, right? Only 3% maximum, and they went to war over that. And yet, look today at the situation we're in. The federal income tax is 10 times higher than what that maximum tax was. And we're not including in that the local and state taxes, right? Holy mother of Jesus H. Christ, what people put up with, man. It's freaking mind-blowing. And again, they'll still sing at the ball games, "Oh, say, can you see?" What the hell do you think you're putting your right hand to your heart over, you know? What do you think you're getting all enamored about? You have no freedom, God damn it. You live in one of the most deceptive, tyrannical, monstrous systems on the planet, baby. I'm so tired of people saying, "Well, it's better than living in other countries." Is it now? Sure, crime rate might be worse in other, third world countries, although stick around. In fact, it depends what part of the country you live in here, doesn't it? We have parts of this country now that have surpassed even third world countries in regards to crime rates, right? Some of the inner city areas. Stick around. They plan to bring that to a town near you very soon, the way we're going. So it's not even a matter of looking at where we're at. Look where we're heading, right? But in fact, we do have absolute tyranny at place here. There's no freedom. God damn it. And I'm not just talking about the economic enslavement factor. God damn it. We've already lost our freedom of speech for the most part, right? There's precious few forums left on the internet where you can still mouth off and expose this system. And those are, disappearing left and right as we speak, right? YouTube used to be a forum for that, right? Anything went on there up until just a few years ago. The COVID era brought an end to that. But up until just a few years ago, yeah, you could expose the elite Jew bastards, right? Pretty much say anything you wanted. Look how they're doing it, too. Oh, how crafty. It's not the government coming out and saying, "You've lost your freedom of speech now. We're going to severely limit what you can say and can't say." Oh, no. It's the social media companies run by Jews that are doing it, right? So that way there, you can't complain and say you're losing your First Amendment rights because the government itself doesn't have its fingerprints on the gun. But when it comes out in the wash, it's all the same, isn't it? Of course it is. Anyway, a question still remains. If the taxes on our wages are not what funds government services and programs, what does fund it? Well, again, loans that the government takes from the Federal Reserve, which we the people get stuck paying. Although, remember, those loans mathematically can't even be paid for, right? All we're paying is a fraction of the usury, a fraction of the interest. It would be bad enough if the government just illegally taxed our wages each week to directly fund itself with an inflated, outrageously out of control budget, right? With all these needless and in fact toxic alphabet agencies. That would be bad enough. But when we realize that it works through the Federal Reserve middleman, which serves no practical, useful, or legal function whatsoever, except to drown us in a bottomless pit of debt, endless, unpayable, enslaving debt. Our dilemma becomes all the more alarming. It's exponentially magnified now. Again, it would be bad enough if our taxes were taken from us and used directly to pay for these services and sickening alphabet agency programs. But it's far worse than that, right? It's a system designed to suck off of us. You see why they're constantly creating new bureaucracies? Look at TSA, right? What a frickin' joke that is. What a goddamn useless, as I like to say, tits on a bull agency that is, right? Useless as tits on a bull. What does it accomplish? Nothing. You still hear stories of people sneaking, guns and knives on planes just to show how useless the damn thing is, right? It's a joke. It's a frickin' sick joke. But in any case, look how much that's costing every single airport in the country, right? Scores of employees for the TSA for every airport. Scores of them. This is billions and billions of dollars. And they know it's a scam, right? They're the terrorists that staged 9/11 in the first place, which called for this alleged need for this thing. There's no need for it. It's a goddamn joke. It's just another way to suck you dry, right? They're constantly coming up with new useless programs just to justify raising the taxes and, of course, making the Federal Reserve richer, right? And people continue to put up with this. This system has no legitimacy to it whatsoever. That joke, which really isn't a joke, it's true. How do you tell when a politician is lying? His lips are moving. It's absolutely true, folks. There's no truth coming out of any politician's mouth, especially the ones on the highest rungs of the ladder, the El Presidentes, right? I can't believe that there are still people that are falling for this left-right paradigm game and thinking that, if I can just get my man in there, if I can vote and make a difference with my vote and get the candidate from the other party in there. Oh, cut it out, man. Cut it out. That fiasco should have been put to bed a long time ago. People should have caught on to that a long time ago. It's been blatantly in your face obvious what a lie that whole thing is. But what a contrast, the system that we now have in place from what was originally the case after the American Revolution. And it was a scam then, too, right? The whole thing was set up as a fraud. Nevertheless, though, it functioned much differently. To some degree, it was only window dressing. But there were actual significant differences that they had to allow. They didn't want those, they didn't want this to be an honest, decent government of the people, for the people, by the people. They never wanted that, the Federalists, right? They always wanted absolute power concentrated in Washington, blah, blah, blah. They couldn't do it, though. They couldn't get away with it right away. They knew people would smell a rat and, wouldn't have allowed the thing to continue. So they had to make concessions. So things were better, much better in this country years ago. From its founding right on up until the early 20th century, that's when things really started hitting the crapper. Oh, the Law of 1871 was a good step in that direction, too. And all during the earliest days of this country's history, you can see where they were busy trying to push for central banking, right? It took them quite a while, 140 plus years or so, before they finally got the thing fully in place. But the relentless bastards were at it right from the beginning. I'll talk about that, too, down the line. It's not just the first and second Bank of the United States, but did you know that both of them were preceded by what was called the Bank of North America? That was yet another Rothschild-created enterprise. Hamilton was heavily instrumental in that. So there were actually 3 attempts, not 2, 3 attempts at central banking in this country, beginning right after the Revolution. They never quite got what they wanted, though. It took them some time. It was a big uphill battle, but they finally did succeed in 1913. And it's been all downhill economically for us ever since. Look at the mess we're in now, guys. How many trillions upon trillions upon trillions of dollars the national debt is? It's not mathematically payable now. With the compounding interest, you could never pay it off. Ever. But there's no need to pay it off because it's not even a real debt. It's a fraudulent compounding interest scam. And you don't think El Governmente knows that? Of course it knows. It's a willing participant in this game. It doesn't care. It's not its own pockets that are getting picked. It's your pockets. Anyway, prior to the establishment of the Federal Reserve, the government subsisted solely on indirect taxes, such as, purchase taxes, and tariffs. Tariffs primarily, right? All during that time, the national budget was balanced every year, except during the Civil War period. Every year, the budget was balanced, right? Subsisting primarily on tariffs and, purchase taxes. That's it. There was no inflated budget, no need for it, and the government subsisted just fine. Our taxes directly paid, and tariffs paid for government services, right? But once they got the fraudulent Federal Reserve and the income tax system implemented, now they didn't have to limit themselves like everyone else does, right? You have to figure out your budget and what you can and can't afford and cut out this and drop that. No. They not only don't have to drop anything, they can and indeed have continued to make up new frickin' ways to suck us dry, right? The sky's the limit, baby. Look what a monstrous bureaucratic bitch of a system we have. They spend, give away, throw away. They don't care. It's not their money. It's not their labor, right? And again, people put up with this. Well, some might argue that today's government couldn't function on tariffs and indirect taxes alone as it once did. This is only because the government operates on a massively inflated budget. Get rid of the outrageous spending, and yes, they could subsist as they used to on indirect taxes and on tariffs. Restore the tariff system. Oh, they have no intention of doing that, though, because then they couldn't control you. Of course, we would have to get off the fiat currency, too, wouldn't we? Yeah, good luck with that one. In order to turn this thing around, folks, and restore sanity, I hate to say it, but it's not going to be at the voting booth. No, the only way to fix this, not just here, but abroad, right? This system is in place across the board in every country. The only way to fix this is for the people themselves, the ones who are getting screwed, for they themselves to deliver justice and forcefully take back their governments. It's the only way. I don't want to see that. I don't want to live through that. But that is the only way it's ever going to happen. You do realize that, right? It's not going to happen any other way, ever. Anyway, let's delve into this lie a little further in some more detail here. The argument is often raised that, all American citizens are required to file and pay income tax. Simply isn't true. Repeated warnings from the government itself and the media have led almost everyone in this country to believe that they have an obligation, to pay their fair share. Well, again, it's not fair. It's not even legal. But that is the consensus, right? And that they somehow owe this money to the government. You don't owe them anything when it comes to your wages, right? You owe them nothing. They do have power, constitutionally, to impose an indirect tax, but you can opt out of indirect taxes, right? You just boycott the products or whatever. And even if they did implement a purchase tax, what they really should do is bring back tariffs. That would lighten our burden tremendously right there, and force them to stop engaging in massive budget hemorrhaging spending, right? Deficit spending. But even if the government was to, and there's been talk about this in recent years, for the getting rid of the income tax, it was actually proposed, and to replace it with a national sales tax. That actually would be more fair because everyone would be paying, the same amount. Everyone, including the little rich bastards, right? Now, it would be unfair because pretty much everything you bought would be taxed, not food or clothing. That's how the Massachusetts sales tax works. You're not charged tax on clothing or food. Well, food from a grocery store. You go to a restaurant, you're taxed. But anyways, that certainly would be much more fair, right? You know what the real biggest scam of all with the income tax is? I mean, the whole thing's a scam, right? But what really ticks me off more than anything else is the fact that it's not proportional to income. And that's the same with the property tax too, right? There's no consideration for the the economically underprivileged. Okay, well, they're not making that much money. We shouldn't be charging 1/3. That's a hell of a lot more money lost to them than it would be for a millionaire or something, right? Again, the millionaires, the billionaires, they don't even pay frickin' taxes, do they? But you know what I'm saying, right? It's not a fair system. And that's why so many people have been losing their homes, because of the property tax alone. I'll get into that later. But that alone has caused people to lose their frickin' homes, right? Even though they paid for it, right? They can come in at any time when you can no longer afford the tax assessor's burden. Bang, they take your home away. Yeah. We're in a free country, aren't we? Anyway. But coming back to the question, are all U.S. citizens liable to pay tax on their income or their wages? To see where Congress made the U.S. citizen working within the 50 states liable for this tax on his or her own income, not only with the 16th Amendment, but there's been other legal chicaneries, seemingly legal chicaneries that they've pulled. Simply read chapters 1 through 6 of the IRS code, which cover the tax on income, and locate the corresponding liability statute. Well, guess what? It doesn't exist. It's not there. That's right. You can scan the entire code by computer or on a CD or whatever, or on the internet, and you can rest assured that you won't find it. Tens of thousands have searched for it and come up empty-handed. It does not exist. The IRS can't even rely on its own code to compel us to comply with this fraudulent income tax. The only ones liable for this tax are foreigners or U.S. citizens working overseas in a foreign country that is under a current tax treaty with the U.S. Although your tax professional may point to Code Section 1, which imposes the income tax on individuals, researching the underlying Treasury regulations for Code Section 1 will reveal that the individual referred to is one with foreign source income only, which is why, as outrageous as it may sound, it's absolutely correct to say that unless in receipt of foreign source income, you are not now paying the income tax, nor have you ever paid one dime in income tax your entire life. So what tax have you been paying? We'll deal with that question in a bit. But first, we need to deal with another question that you may be asking yourself. How could it be possible that I've never paid a single dime in income tax when I, as a taxpayer, have always been required to file Form 1040 to report my income? The Department of the Treasury, which supervises the IRS, made the following declaration back in 1916, the time of the passage of the Income Tax Amendment, the 16th Amendment. The responsible heads, agents, or representatives, it says, of non-resident aliens shall make a full and complete return of the income therefrom on Form 1040. Did you catch that? Representatives of non-resident aliens. That's what the 1040 form is for. So Form 1040, just like the income tax, is for foreigners or U.S. citizens with foreign source income. They've tricked you into thinking it applies to you. Yet more legal chicanery to help them get away with this fraud, right? As further proof of this fact, under the 1980 Paperwork Reduction Act, Congress made the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, the watchdog required to approve any government agency form, that asks for information from a U.S. citizen. According to the OMB and the National Office of the IRS, the required form for U.S. citizens to use to report income is not Form 1040. It's Form 2555, titled Foreign Earned Income. The top of the form, 2555, says, quote, attach to front of Form 1040. Form 1040, U.S. Individual Income Tax Return, is merely a supplemental worksheet to the required Form 2555, which states, for use by U.S. citizens with foreign source income, of course. You see the little game? It's all chicanery. Like the Apostle Paul said, crafty man that I am, I fooled you by trickery. Apparently, the IRS does know the difference between an individual and a citizen, but they're not going to let you in on that. They also know that it's a voluntary system of taxation, right? And even though it's stated in their documents, the impression is you still have to pay it with the threat of the SWAT team coming. So what really motivates people to comply? Fear, not the law. Now back to our other question. If you haven't been paying the income tax, then what have you actually been paying? You've been paying the employment tax, otherwise known as the wage or Social Security tax, the socialism tax, right? The employment tax is found in chapters 21 through 25 of the IRS Code and has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the income tax under the law. The true definition of income is money earned beyond your wages, for example, profits on investments, while the word wages refers exclusively to financial reimbursements for services rendered. Neither of them, of course, are constitutionally taxable for U.S. citizens who live and work in the United States, since taxation of either of them amounts to a direct tax, which the Constitution doesn't allow for. And who is liable for the employment tax? The employee, but not just any employee, only one who volunteers to apply for a Social Security number, one who volunteers to use that number to build up credits toward retirement and other federal benefits, one who volunteers to sign a Form W-4, Employees Withholding Allowance Certificate, and allows taxes to be withheld from his or her paycheck. That's it. All voluntary. The fact is that there is no law requiring any worker to execute a Form W-4 either. It's strictly elective. Of course, it appears mandatory since most employees won't hire you without one. Why not? Because they've never read the actual law. They just think it's policy, and so do their prospecting employees, right? They think it's required, so everybody just goes along. It's all chicanery, all trickery. Anyway, but the W-4 is simply a permission slip that allows an employer to withhold taxes from an employee. No legality, no requirement, no obligation. All elective. So the question is asked, if everyone who hires others, is everyone who hires others automatically an employer? No, only those who have signed Form SS-4 application for employer identification number. And, as you may have guessed by now, this form is not required either. It's totally freaking elective. After all, an application is always voluntary, isn't it? Otherwise, there'd be no need, no reason to apply. The proper paperwork to stop tax withholding in the workplace is explained in 26 Code of Federal Regulations, Section 1.1441-5, and in IRS Publication 515, which, in speaking to the withholding agent, simply states, quote, if an individual gives you a written statement stating that he or she is a citizen or resident of the United States and you do not know otherwise, you do not have to withhold tax. Look at this crap, man. Unfreaking real. Their own documents show what a friggin' fraud this is. This document then goes on to refer the reader to another form, Publication 15, Circular E, Employer's Tax Guide, for additional information. However, as you may have guessed, this information does not apply to any American citizen who is earning income or wages in the United States, unless, of course, that citizen has volunteered to have his wages taxed. Imagine that. One who hires others does not need to be an unpaid bookkeeper for the federal government or an accomplice in the government's theft of the wages of its own workers. None of this is required. None of this has any legal binding aspect to it. The fact is, as the Social Security Administration readily admits in its standard form letter to anyone who asks, quote, the Social Security Act does not require a person to have a Social Security number in order to live and work in the United States, nor does it require a number simply for the sake of having one. You're not required. And yet everybody thinks you are required because everyone has one and you can't get a job. You can't do this. You can't do that. But you don't need to. You were tricked into playing this sleazy little Jew game. Title 42 of the United States Code, Section 405B, states under subsection 2 that Social Security numbers are assigned, quote, to an individual who is an applicant for or recipient of benefits. Again, all elective. You applied for it, and now you're a slave to it only because you applied or allowed the thing to be foisted on you at the hospital when you were born, right? Or your parents allowed it, right? And you allowed it to continue later in your adult life. So, once again, there simply is no law that requires a U.S. citizen to obtain or use a number or to get one for his or her child. But it gets worse than this. The IRS can't even establish a record in its computer system by law for any entity that does not volunteer to number itself. Once you volunteer, they've got you, you see? This makes me think of the form that parents are handed when it's recommended that their child be put on an IEP, in an individualized education program, right? The parents, if they read the fine print, and few ever do, the parents are told that you're not obliged to accept the school's recommendation to put your kid on an IEP. Of course you're not. You don't have to accept that. However, it goes on to say that once you agree by signing this form, the school will not be obliged to go along with your decision to refuse any recommendations that the school will make for your child in the education process that the school feels is in the best interest of your child. If, in fact, you object and the school proceeds with the program recommended, you can take legal action. And then it gives you phone numbers you can call. It's telling you that what you're doing in signing that form is you are willfully giving over your authority as a parent. This is the same game with the IRS. You're willfully signing yourself over, which is why, once again, the 13th Amendment only forbids involuntary servitude. It doesn't forbid voluntary servitude. All of this, guys, is based on your voluntary compliance. All of it. Every goddamn last bit of it. We have been bamboozled and tricked into signing ourselves over as fartigan slaves without even realizing it. And so guess what? The Supreme Court has ruled that all contracts are null and void if the contractee is not made aware ahead of time of all of the stipulations and obligations. No one's ever made aware of any of this, right? You're given the number now. You don't even apply for it. It's just assigned to you and you accept it because you think you have to. And so you're tricked into it, but you're never told the obligations and requirements, just like with the COVID jabs, right? You asked for the vaccine insert and you got a goddamn deliberately, intentionally left blank sheet of paper. You weren't informed. You weren't given informed consent. You weren't told what was in it and what the harmful side effects have been and potentially could be. They tricked you. Just like they trick you with the income tax, just like they trick you to sign your kid over to an IEP so they have total control. Now they can put your kid on drugs. They can take your kid away and deem you an unfit parent, all because you signed the contract. You willfully. They love to do this, guys. They set it up this way because they really get their rocks off on tricking you and getting you to willfully go along with their traps. Let me stress that those who never signed up for Social Security number or never had one foisted on them, or for that matter, those who have revoked their Social Security numbers are never contacted by the IRS, ever. Only when you agree to their little contract do they come after you, because you have made yourself a party to their little control game, right? And it is indeed through the Social Security number that these bastards have been able to track, exploit, and control us from cradle to grave. Notice what Carroll Quigley had to say on this matter in his famous book, Tragedy on Hope. He said, his, meaning the individual American, his freedom and choice will be controlled within very narrow alternatives by the fact that he will be numbered from birth and followed as a number through his educational training, his required military or other public service, his tax contributions, his health and medical requirements, and his final retirement and death benefits. Everything is tracked through the Social Security number. This is what has given them, more than anything else, absolute invasive control over every person's life. The whole Social Security system, the numbering system that goes along with it, came about, of course, under FDR, a Zio pig bastard, if ever there was one. Notice what his son-in-law, Curtis B. Dahl, in his book, FDR, my exploited father-in-law, had to say. And of course, in this book, he's trying to engage in apologetics for his father-in-law. Oh, he's innocent of the deeds that he did. It was his controllers. Well, sure, a lot of the ideas and policies implemented by him weren't his own, but he was certainly a willing participant in them. Anyway, here's what he said. For a long time, I felt that FDR had developed many thoughts and ideas that were his own to benefit this country. But he didn't, he says. Most of his thoughts, his political ammunition, as it were carefully manufactured for him in advance by the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, One World Money Group. Brilliantly, with great gusto, like a fine piece of artillery, he exploded this prepared ammunition in the middle of an unsuspecting target, the American people, and thus paid off and retained his internationalist political support. Lyndon Johnson, of course, later carried the socialist torch to new heights with his so-called Great Society. Under FDR, it was the New Deal, right? They always have these cute little slogans that they label their socialist/communist schemes with, right? It was the New Freedom under Wilson, right? Woodrow Wilson. Great Society is what the Jew LBJ called it. The push for socialism has been and continues to be an important piece of the twisted Zio puzzle. H.G. Wells, who wrote extensively about the coming world government, right, made this point very clear in his 1939 book titled, fittingly, The New World Order. He said, this new and complete global revolution that we contemplate can be defined in a very few words. It is a outright world socialism, scientifically planned and directed, plus B, a sustained insistence upon law based on fuller, more jealously conceived restatement of the personal rights of man. Restatement. Yeah, rewording everything so it's all window dressing, so it looks like it's in the benefit of man, but really only in the benefit of those at the top pulling the strings. Such as the right to follow whatever the controllers command, right? Plus C, it says, or Wells wrote, a sedulous expansion of the educational organization to the ever-growing demands of the new order, the new world order. Revamping education to whose demands? Those pushing for the new order, for the world system of absolute totalitarianism, right? Putting it at its compactest is the triangle of socialism, law, and knowledge, he said, which frames the revolution that may yet save the world. Oh, yeah, it's a revolution, all right. Is it going to save the world? It's going to save the world from freedom and from justice and from economic security. It'll only be economic security for the Zio bastards, right? Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev, himself a dedicated globalist, as well as a frickin' Mason, echoed these same sentiments of pushing for socialism around the world in his Perestroika book. He said, we will proceed toward better socialism rather than away from it. Any hope that we will begin to build a different non-socialist society and go over to the other camp are unrealistic and futile. Imagine that. You're not realistic if you think we're going to move away from socialism. It's also futile for you to think that you can stop it, right? It's going to happen, he says. Those in the West who expect us to give up socialism will be miserably disappointed, he said. And what does he really mean when he says socialism? Ultimately, communism, baby. Communism. So, comrades, that is the real meaning of perestroika. Grab your vodka and toast with me, comrades. One of the big movers and shakers pushing for world socialism over the years has been the British Fabian Socialist Society, of which H.G. Wells was a prominent member, right? Their tactic has been to move slowly and imperceptibly toward global domination so as not to arouse the suspicion of the masses and thus their resistance. Let's have a look at what Roger Baldwin, an American Fabian and former executive director of the ACLU, the Jew-run American Civil Liberties Union, he made this following statement before other ACL leaders years back. He said, "Do steer away from making it, the ACLU, look like a socialist enterprise. We want also to look like patriots in everything we do." We're not patriots, but we want to look like that. We are socialists, but we don't want to look like that. That's what he's saying. Use deception, right? Vive war through means of deception. The motto of the frickin' Mossad, right? That's the game he's playing here. We want to get, he said, a good lot of things, like a good deal about the Constitution and what our forefathers wanted to make of the country. In other words, play that all up, right? Focus on good things that people want to hear. The Constitution, the Founding Fathers. And to show that we are really the folks that really stand for the spirit of our institutions. We're not, we're phonies, but we want to come across that way so we can sell our sleazy agenda to people, getting them convinced it's in their interests when it's actually designed to screw them. Stripped of all the rhetoric, that's exactly the meaning of this quote. To demonstrate further how sleazy the Fabian Society is, right? The headquarters of the Fabian Society of England is located at the Beatrice Webb House in Surrey, England. This building originally contained a stained glass window upon which was found the following verse from a poem that was written by Omar Khayyam, himself a dedicated Fabian socialist, which served as a summation of Fabian philosophy and purpose. And here's how it read. Dear love, couldst thou and I with fate conspire to grasp this sorry scheme of this entire? Could we not shatter it to bits and then remold it nearer to the heart's desire? That's a very interesting quote, because as many of you may recall, if you're an old fart like me, the Canadian band Rush once had a hit song called Closer to the Heart, right? Well, Closer to the Heart is based entirely around this poem. And of course, Geddy Lee et al. All the band members were frickin' Jews, right? And they all favored and were, in fact, involved with the Fabian Socialist Society. So that song was like their New World Order theme song, right? Just like, you know, John Lennon, probably influenced by Yoko Ono in the making of this song, wrote Imagine. Imagine is a New World Order theme song. Read the lyrics. Check them out. It's absolutely from start to finish, all in praise to the New World Order. And so is Closer to the Heart from the Fabian socialist perspective. Actually, let me cite those lyrics from Closer to the Heart. And the men who hold high places must be the ones who start to mold a new reality closer to the heart. The blacksmith and the artist reflect it in their art. They forge their creativity closer to the heart. Philosophers and plowmen each must know his part to sow a new mentality closer to the heart. A rather short song, but oh boy, look how it gets the message across. Everyone has to play their part now. Everybody jump in and become a part of this great movement. George Bush Sr. said that in his one of his address. Well, he mentioned the New World Order several times, but in one of those addresses, he talked about becoming part of something greater than yourselves and join this community of conscience. We have worked for this, for the past 2 centuries, referring back to the time of Adam Weishaupt, right? Who's the we there? Freemasonry, of course. While we're at it, why don't I quickly read, and then I'll end off with this for now. There'll be a part 3 to this series. But why don't I read the lyrics to Imagine? Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you tried. No hell below us. Above us, only sky. Yeah, there's no hell below us. We're right in hell. Imagine all the people living for today. Yeah, because there won't be a tomorrow if these bastards have their way. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Yeah, except the Jew religion. But notice, no countries, right? Yeah, there's your New World Order. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Ha ha. You mean the ones they haven't killed off yet? Living in peace. Yeah, because there'll be no chance of you ever rising up against the tyranny. That's their version of peace, right? The absence of all opposition. Everyone's disarmed. We've got a monopoly on weapons. We can totally control you like puppeteers, and there's nothing you can do about it. You may say I am a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. Oh, not under that banner, baby. Imagine no possessions. Ah! You will be happy, and you will own nothing. Imagine no possessions, he says. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger, a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people living, sharing all the world. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then the chorus again. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us and the world will be as one. No, thanks. I'll pass. Thank you very much. Wow. Oh, there's been others like that too, but those are 2 of the most prominent New World Order theme songs from over the decades. Anyway, guys, I'll stop there. I got a little bit more material to cover in one more video, so we'll catch you then. Thanks for joining me. Take care.